The will fell from my trembling hands like autumn leaves in harmattan season, scattering across the marble floor of our Lagos home. 23 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless sacrifices, all reduced to nothing. Everything Chinedu owned, every naira we'd built together, every property I'd helped furnish with my own sweat, was going to her. Folake Adebayo, his secretary, his mistress, the woman who'd been destroying my family for 2 years without my knowledge. What would you do if you walked in on this betrayal? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. I picked up the document again, my hands shaking as I read the lawyer's letterhead. Last Will and Testament of Chinedu Okechukwu Okafor. The date was fresh, just 3 weeks old. 3 weeks since our last family dinner where he'd smiled at our children, Kemi, Tund, and little Adana, promising them a bright future. 3 weeks since he'd held me close and whispered sweet Igbo endearments in my ear. The front door slammed, echoing through our 5-bedroom house in Victoria Island. Chinedu was home from another business trip to Abuja. I could hear him humming one of Burna Boy's latest hits as he dropped his briefcase in the hallway. 23 years of marriage had taught me to read his moods through sound alone. He was happy, probably fresh from her arms. "Adiz," he called out, using the pet name that once made my heart flutter. "Where's my wife? I brought you something special from the capital." I stayed frozen in our bedroom, the will still clutched in my hands. Through our window, I could see the bustling streets of Lagos, vendors selling roasted plantain and suya, yellow Danfo buses weaving through traffic like threading needles. Life continuing as normal while mine crumbled. His footsteps approached our bedroom. Heavy, confident strides of a man who believed his secrets were safe. The door opened, and there he stood, my husband of over 2 decades. Chinedu Okafor, successful import-export businessman, respected elder at our church, father to our 3 beautiful children, and apparently a man planning to leave me with nothing. "Ada, why the long face?" He moved toward me with that charming smile that had won my heart at the University of Lagos all those years ago. Did something happen? I held up the will, watching his expression change from confusion to shock to something I'd never seen before, cold calculation. "Where did you get that?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Does it matter?" I stood slowly, every muscle in my body tense. "The question is why, Chinedu? Why would you do this to us? To your children?" He ran his hand over his head, a nervous habit I'd grown familiar with during business troubles. But this wasn't business, this was our life. "Ada, you don't understand. There are complications." Complications. My voice rose sharp enough to cut through his excuses. Is Folake a complication? Or am I? The color drained from his face. In that moment, I saw 23 years of lies unraveling. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every time he'd come home smelling like unfamiliar perfume and blamed it on client dinners. "How long, Chinedu?" I whispered. Before he could answer, 15-year-old Kemi's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Daddy, you're back. Did you bring us anything?" We stood there, locked in a stare that felt like the last moments of our marriage. Outside, Lagos hummed with evening traffic, the call to Maghrib prayer echoing from nearby mosques mixing with church bells, a symphony of faith I'd always found comforting. Now it felt like a funeral dirge. Chinedu reached for the will, but I pulled it back. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't you dare try to take this from me too." His phone buzzed. A text message. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen, lighting up his palm. The message was from F. Adebayo. "Missing you already, my king. When will you tell her about us?" The domestic betrayal was complete. Not only was he planning to leave me penniless, but his mistress was growing impatient with their affair. "Ada, get out." The words came from somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't know existed. "Get out of this room. Get out of this house. Get out of my sight. This is my house. Not according to this will." I waved the document. Apparently, it belongs to Folake now. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. Real, genuine fear. He'd been caught, and we both knew it. As he backed toward the door, I made a decision that would change everything. If Chinedu wanted to play games with our family's future, if he thought he could manipulate and betray the woman who'd stood by him through poverty and success, then he was about to learn what this Igbo woman was truly capable of. The war for my dignity, my children's inheritance, and my very survival was about to begin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think Ada should do next? Comment below. 3 days passed in eerie silence. Chinedu had retreated to his study, emerging only for brief, awkward encounters with the children. I watched him from across the dining table during meals, noting how he pushed food around his plate without eating, how his usually immaculate business shirts now hung wrinkled on his frame. The children sensed something wrong. 11-year-old Tund kept asking why Daddy looked sad, while little Adana, only 7, had taken to hiding behind my wrapper whenever her father entered the room. Only Kemi, wise beyond her 15 years, seemed to understand that the foundation of our family had shifted. "Mummy, did Daddy do something bad?" she asked me quietly as we folded laundry in my bedroom. I smoothed one of Chinedu's shirts, remembering how I used to iron them with such care, taking pride in sending him out looking distinguished. Now, the cotton felt foreign under my fingers. "Adults sometimes make mistakes that hurt the people they love," I said carefully. Kemi's intelligent eyes studied my face. She had inherited my intuition and her father's stubbornness, a dangerous combination. "Is that why you stopped cooking his favorite meals?" Smart girl. Yes, I had stopped cooking. No more pepper soup with goat meat, no more jollof rice with extra seasoning the way he liked it, no more fresh palm nut soup with stockfish. For 23 years, I had risen before dawn to prepare elaborate meals, believing that feeding my husband well was part of loving him well. Now, I prepared simple meals for the children and myself. Chinedu could fend for himself. The shift was subtle but powerful. In Igbo culture, food is love, care, respect. By withdrawing this fundamental act of service, I was sending a message that resonated deeper than words. You have broken something sacred, and I will no longer nurture what you have poisoned. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my younger sister Nkechi, calling from Enugu. "Ada, how far? You sound different since our last conversation." I stepped onto our balcony, overlooking the chaotic beauty of Victoria Island. Below, street hawkers balanced impossible loads on their heads while navigating between honking cars. The resilience of Lagos women, something I was learning to embody. "Nkechi, if you discovered your husband had betrayed you completely, what would you do?" What has Chinedu done now?" I told her everything. The will, the mistress, the years of lies. As I spoke, I could hear her sharp intake of breath, the way she muttered Igbo curses under her breath. "That foolish man. After everything you've sacrificed? Ada, you built that business with him from nothing. You worked in that small shop in Alaba Market while he was studying for his master's. You sold your mother's gold jewelry to help him get his first import license. I know. And now he wants to give everything to some Lagos girl? Some secretary who probably doesn't even know how to cook proper egusi soup." Despite my pain, I almost smiled. Nkechi had always been fierce, protective of family honor with the intensity of a lioness. But her next words sobered me. "You need to fight this, Ada. But you need to be smart about it." That evening, as I served dinner, rice and stew for the children, nothing for Chinedu, I studied my husband across the table. He had lost weight in just 3 days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually confident demeanor had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "Ada," he said quietly, "we need to talk." "I think we've said everything necessary." "The children." "Yes, let's talk about the children." I set down my spoon carefully. "Let's talk about how their father plans to leave them nothing. How their university fees, their future, their security means less to you than keeping your mistress happy." Tund looked up from his plate, confusion written across his young face. "What's a mistress?" The question hung in the air like smoke from burning palm oil. Chinedu's face went ashen. "Go to your room and finish your homework," I told Tund gently. "All of you." As the children filed out, Kemi lingered in the doorway, her eyes moving between her parents with an understanding that broke my heart. "Kemigo," I said softly. When we were alone, Chinedu tried again. "Ada, you're not being reasonable." Reasonable. The word came out sharp as broken glass. "You want to discuss reasonable? Let's talk about how reasonable it is to discover your husband's infidelity and financial betrayal through a will he was careless enough to leave lying around. It was in my locked drawer, which you left unlocked. Like your phone last week when Folklore texted about missing your strong hands. Like your email account where I found hotel reservations for 2 to Dubai. You've been sloppy, Chinedu. Arrogant. You thought your wife was too stupid, too trusting, too broken by years of emotional manipulation to notice." He flinched at each accusation because they were true. "I was going to tell you." "When? After you died and left me homeless? After your precious Folklore inherited the house my sweat helped build?" "Ada, please. You're starving me." The admission hung between us. Yes, I was starving him. Not just of food, but of a comfort, care, and unconditional support I'd provided for over 2 decades. And it was working. The powerful businessman who commanded respect in Lagos boardrooms was crumbling without his wife's nurturing. "You've been starving our marriage for years," I replied. "Now you know how it feels." His phone buzzed again. Another message from Folklore, no doubt. This time, he didn't look at it. But I had seen enough. It was time to escalate my strategy. If Chinedu thought his wife would quietly disappear into the shadows while he played house with his mistress, he was about to discover just how wrong he could be. The next morning, I would make a phone call that would change everything. But tonight, I would let him go to bed hungry, wondering what his once predictable wife was planning next. Are you Team Ada, or do you think she's going too far? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories. The Lagos sun was merciless as I sat in the air-conditioned office of Barrister Emeka Okonkwo, one of the most respected family lawyers in Victoria Island. His law firm occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming tower, offering a bird's-eye view of the city that had shaped my adult life. "Mrs. Okafor," Barrister Okonkwo began, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the will I'd brought. "This is indeed a troubling document. However, your husband is very much alive. A will only takes effect upon death." I had dressed carefully for this meeting. My best Ankara dress in deep purple and gold, my hair wrapped in a matching gelly, gold jewelry that caught the light. I wanted to look like a woman of substance, not a victim. "I understand that," I said calmly. "But I want to know my options. What rights do I have as his wife?" "Under Nigerian law, you have significant rights. Joint property acquired during marriage belongs to both spouses. If you can prove your contribution to building the family wealth." "I can prove everything." I pulled out a folder I'd spent the previous evening organizing. Bank statements showing my contributions, business registration documents with my signature, photographs of me working in their first small shop, correspondence with suppliers I had cultivated personally. The lawyer's eyebrows rose as he examined my documentation. "Mrs. Okafor, you've been very thorough. These records show substantial contribution to the family business. In the event of divorce." "I'm not interested in divorce yet." My interruption surprised even myself. "I'm interested in protecting my children's inheritance and teaching my husband the value of what he's trying to throw away." Barrister Okonkwo leaned back in his leather chair. "What exactly are you planning?" I smiled, a smile that would have made my late mother proud. She had been a petty trader who built a small empire selling fabrics in Onitsha market through sheer will and strategic thinking. Her daughter had learned those lessons well. "I want to understand every legal avenue available to me." Today, 3 hours later, I emerged from that office armed with knowledge that felt more powerful than any weapon. I understood joint property laws, spousal rights, business partnership regulations, and most importantly, how to protect assets that rightfully belong to my family. My next stop was the family business office in Ikeja. Chinedu and I had built Okafor International Trading from a single container of goods from China to a multi-million naira import business. Our warehouse employed 15 people. Our client list included some of Lagos's biggest retailers, and I had been actively involved in every major decision for over a decade. I walked into our office building with my head high. Several employees greeted me warmly. They all knew Mrs. Ada, who brought them Christmas bonuses and remembered their children's names. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Ada," called out Jennifer, our accountant. "Are you looking for Olga?" "No, Jennifer. I'm here to review some business documents. Could you prepare the partnership agreements and financial statements for the last 5 years?" Jennifer looked confused but complied. As I waited, I noticed how naturally the staff turned to me with questions, how they seemed more relaxed in my presence than when Chinita was around. Interesting. The documents confirmed what I suspected. While Chinita handled external negotiations and traveled for business development, I had managed internal operations, staff relations, and financial oversight. On paper, I was listed as a full partner in the business, with legal rights he seemed to have forgotten about in his rush to rewrite his will. My phone rang. "Chinita. Ada, where are you? The children are asking for you." "I'm handling some business matters. The children know how to prepare simple snacks if they're hungry." "Ada, this has gone far enough. Come home so we can discuss this like adults." Adults don't sneak around with secretaries while planning to disinherit their wives. Adults don't lie to their families for years. When you're ready to act like an adult, we can talk. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, I returned home to find chaos. Chinita was in the kitchen, attempting to cook rice for the children. The pot was smoking, the rice was burning, and little Adana was crying because she was hungry. Kemi was trying to salvage the situation while Tun sat at the dining table looking bewildered. "Mummy." Adana ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my legs. "Daddy burned the rice." I surveyed the kitchen disaster. Chinita stood there holding a wooden spoon, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. His usually pristine shirt was stained with palm oil. His expensive shoes were splattered with water. "I was trying to help," he said quietly. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. This was the man I'd fallen in love with, the father of my children, looking lost and vulnerable in his own kitchen. But then I remembered Folklare's text messages, the will that would leave my children with nothing, the years of betrayal disguised as business trips. "The children need to eat," I said simply. "Step aside." In 20 minutes, I had prepared jollof rice with chicken and vegetables. The kitchen filled with the familiar aromas of home: onions, tomatoes, curry powder, bay leaves. The children gathered around the table, their faces bright with relief and hunger. I served them generous portions, then sat down with my own plate. Chinita lingered hopefully. "Where's my food?" he asked finally. "There's bread in the pantry. I'm sure you can manage." As I fed my children, I felt his eyes on me, weighing, calculating, realizing perhaps for the first time that his wife was not the pushover he'd taken for granted. After dinner, as I tucked Adana into bed, she whispered, "Mummy, why is Daddy sad?" "Sometimes grown-ups have to learn difficult lessons," I told her, smoothing her forehead. "But everything will be okay." But would it? As I prepared for bed, I could hear Chinita on the phone in his study, his voice low and urgent. Was he talking to Folklore? Planning his next move? Or finally beginning to understand what he stood to lose? Tomorrow, I would implement the next phase of my plan. If my husband wanted to play games with our family's future, he was about to discover that his wife had learned to play chess while he was still thinking checkers. Comment your thoughts on Ada's strategy. Is she handling this the right way? Don't forget to share this story with someone who loves African drama. The revelation came through Instagram, of all places. I was scrolling mindlessly through my feed when I saw her, Folklore Adebayo, posting from a luxury spa in Lekki, champagne glass in hand, caption reading, "Celebrating new beginnings with my king crown red heart, hashtag blessed and favored, hashtag new chapter." My king. The phrase made my stomach turn. But it was the location tag that made my blood run cold. The Wheatbaker Hotel Ikoyi. The same hotel where Chinita had claimed to be hosting potential Chinese investors just 2 weeks ago. The same hotel where our family savings had funded his crucial business meetings. I scrolled through her profile with the methodical precision of a detective. Pictures of expensive dinners at Lagos's finest restaurants. Shopping trips to Dubai Mall. A Cartier watch I recognized because I'd admired it in a magazine, telling Chinedu how beautiful it was. He dismissed it as too expensive then, but apparently not too expensive for his mistress. The worst part? Comments from people I knew, mutual acquaintances, friends from our church. Some expressing congratulations, others asking questions about Ada's situation. The entire Lagos social circle seemed to know about their relationship, while I'd been kept in the dark like a fool. My hands shook as I screenshot everything. Evidence. Proof of how they'd been flaunting their affair, while I played the dutiful wife at home. "Mummy, are you okay?" Kemi stood in the doorway of my bedroom, school bag slung over her shoulder. My observant daughter had developed a habit of checking on me before leaving for school, as if she sensed the fragility beneath my composed exterior. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Have a good day at school." But I wasn't fine. The public humiliation was worse than the betrayal itself. How many people had seen me at social gatherings, at church functions, at business events, knowing about Chinedu's affair while pitying the clueless wife? After the children left for school, I sat in my living room and made a decision that would escalate everything. I called my best friend Chinyu, who ran a successful public relations firm in Lagos. "Chinyu, I need your help. Professional help." "Ada, what's going on? You've been avoiding my calls for weeks." I told her everything. The will, the affair, the Instagram posts, the years of lies. As I spoke, I could hear her muttering increasingly creative Igbo curses. "That son of a goat. Ada, I've been in PR for 15 years, and I've never seen someone be so careless with their reputation. Posting pictures while married? What kind of amateur mistake is that?" I want to fight back, Chinyu, but I want to be smart about it. Good. Because I have some ideas that will make him wish he'd never heard the name Folake Adebayo. That afternoon, Chinyu arrived at my house with her laptop and a determined expression. She was a small woman with the intensity of a caged leopard, and watching her work was like witnessing a masterclass in strategic communication. "First," she said, spreading documents across my dining table, "we document everything. Every post, every public appearance, every transaction. Then we start building your narrative." "My narrative?" "Ada, you've been letting them control the story. The cheating husband and his young mistress. The discarded wife too proud to speak up. But what if the story was different? What if it was about a successful businesswoman discovering her husband's betrayal and handling it with dignity and strength?" For the next 3 hours, we worked. Chinyu helped me create a comprehensive social media strategy, not for drama or public shaming, but for reclaiming my story. Professional photos highlighting my role in the family business. Posts about women's empowerment and financial independence. Subtle messages that positioned me as a woman of substance, not a victim. "The key," Chinyu explained, "is never to mention them directly. Let your success and dignity speak for themselves. Trust me, people will connect the dots." As evening approached, Chinedu returned home from work. He looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. The past week of limited food and domestic withdrawal was taking its toll. "Ada, I brought dinner," he announced, holding up bags from Yellow Chili, one of our favorite restaurants. "Thought maybe we could eat together. Talk." I looked at the expensive takeout, remembering how we used to enjoy their suya and pepper soup during happier times. The gesture would have touched me a week ago. Now it felt like manipulation. "That's thoughtful," I said neutrally. "The children will appreciate it. What about you?" "I've already eaten." It was a lie, but watching his face fall gave me a strange satisfaction. He was learning what it felt like to have his gestures rejected, his efforts dismissed. During dinner, I noticed how he kept checking his phone, presumably for messages from Folake. Each time it buzzed, his expression grew more tense. "Daddy," Tund asked innocently, "why do you look at your phone so much now?" Chinedu's fork clattered against his plate. "Work, son. Just work." But we all knew it wasn't work. Even 11-year-old Tund was beginning to sense something amiss in the family dynamics. Later that evening, as I tucked the children into bed, I overheard Chinedu on a phone call in his study. His voice was strained, defensive. Folklore, you need to be patient. No, I can't leave tonight. Yes, I know what I promised, but the situation is complicated. The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. His mistress was growing impatient, demanding more of his time and attention. The pressure was building from both sides, a wife who had withdrawn her support, and a mistress who was becoming increasingly demanding. Perfect. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with notifications. Chinyu's strategy was already working. My LinkedIn post about women in business had received dozens of likes and encouraging comments. My Instagram story about finding strength in difficult times was getting supportive messages from friends I hadn't heard from in months. But the most interesting message came from an unknown number. Mrs. Okafor, I know about your husband's affair. There are things you need to know. Can we meet tomorrow? My heart raced as I stared at the message. Someone else knew about Chinita's betrayal. Someone with information I apparently needed to hear. I typed back quickly, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone who cares about truth and justice. Ikeja City Mall, food court, 2 p.m. tomorrow. I'll be wearing a red headscarf. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Chinita toss and turn in his guilt-ridden sleep, I wondered what new revelations awaited me. How much deeper did his betrayal run? And who was this mysterious person with information about my marriage? Tomorrow would bring answers. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I fell asleep with a sense of anticipation rather than despair. What secrets do you think this mysterious person knows? Drop your theories in the comments below. The food court at Ikeja City Mall buzzed with the usual Lagos energy. Families sharing plates of jollof rice, young couples laughing over pizza, children pestering their parents for ice cream. I spotted her immediately. An elegant woman in her 40s wearing a red headscarf and traditional buba and iro, sitting alone with a cup of tea. As I approached, she looked up with intelligent eyes that held a mixture of sympathy and determination. Mrs. Okafor? I nodded, settling into the plastic chair across from her. I'm Dr. Bukola Adeyemi. I work at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming. How do you know about my situation? Dr. Adeyemi's expression grew grave. Because I've been treating your husband for the past 8 months. And there are things about his relationship with Miss Adebayo that you need to understand. My blood turned to ice water. Treating him for what? She glanced around to ensure privacy, then leaned forward. Stress-related hypertension and anxiety disorder. He's been prescribed medication for both. But that's not why I contacted you. Then why? Because Folake Adebayo brought him to the hospital 3 times. As his fiancée. She made medical decisions, signed forms, acted as his emergency contact. Dr. Adeyemi's voice dropped. Mrs. Okafor, she's been telling people, including medical staff, that you're divorced. The food court noise faded into a distant hum. What? She's been presenting herself as his wife-to-be, claiming you're his ex-wife who refuses to accept the end of your marriage. She even showed hospital staff what she claimed was divorce paperwork. I felt dizzy. The level of deception was breathtaking. Not only was Chinedu planning to leave me everything in his will, but his mistress was actively working to erase me from his life while he was still alive. There's more. Dr. Adeyemi reached into her handbag. She asked me about life insurance policies, specifically whether wives could collect if there were complications. What kind of complications? She asked hypothetical questions about what would happen if a husband became seriously ill and his wife couldn't care for him properly, whether neglect could affect insurance claims. My hands began to shake. Folake wasn't just planning to inherit Chinita's wealth. She was strategizing about how to accelerate the process. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Dr. Adeyemi's eyes flashed with anger. Because I've seen this before. Young women who prey on established men, manipulate them emotionally and financially, then position themselves to benefit from their decline. And because, as a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm. Watching someone destroy a family while potentially planning something worse violates everything I believe in. She slid a folder across the table. These are copies of his medical records. Legally, you have a right to them as his wife. His stress levels have been dangerously high. His blood pressure requires daily medication. And according to him, his home life has become increasingly difficult because his wife doesn't understand his needs. I stared at the medical reports. Chinedu had been portraying me as an unsupportive, difficult wife to medical professionals, while I'd been home caring for his children and managing his household. Dr. Adeyemi, what would happen if his condition worsened? With his current stress levels and blood pressure, he could have a stroke or a heart attack. The medications help, but his emotional state is clearly deteriorating. She paused meaningfully. A loving, supportive home environment would be crucial for his recovery. As I absorbed this information, a terrible clarity settled over me. Chinedu wasn't just cheating. He was being systematically manipulated by a woman who saw him as a meal ticket. And his health was deteriorating under the stress of maintaining a double life. But instead of confiding in his wife of 23 years, instead of seeking support from his family, he had chosen to paint me as the problem while planning to leave me with nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Chinedu. Ada, I'm not feeling well. Could you pick up my blood pressure medication from the pharmacy? I stared at the message, then at Dr. Adeyemi, who had noticed my expression. That's his medication? She asked gently. I nodded. Mrs. Okafor, I need to tell you something else. He's missed several appointments recently. When I called to reschedule, Miss Adebayo answered his phone and said she would handle his medical needs from now on. But according to our records, she hasn't ensured he's taking his medication consistently. The implication was clear. Folake was presenting herself as his caregiver while potentially neglecting his actual medical needs. I thought about the past week, how thin he'd grown, how stressed he appeared, how desperately he looked when asking about food. I had been starving him emotionally and physically, yes, but apparently his mistress wasn't providing the care she promised either. What do you think I should do? I asked. Dr. Adeyemi studied my face carefully. As a medical professional, I think a man with his condition needs a stable, caring environment to recover. As a woman who's seen too many families destroyed by manipulation, I think you need to decide whether you're fighting for your marriage or fighting for your dignity. Because sometimes you can't do both. As I drove home through Lagos traffic, my mind raced. I had been playing a defensive game, protecting my children's inheritance, establishing my legal rights, documenting the affair. But Folake had been playing offense, actively working to replace me in every aspect of Chinedu's life. The question was, did I continue my campaign of emotional withdrawal, potentially pushing him further into her arms and worsening his health? Or did I change tactics, using his vulnerability and medical needs as leverage to expose her true motives? When I arrived home, I found Chinedu lying on the living room sofa, looking pale and exhausted. The children were doing homework at the dining table, occasionally glancing at their father with worry. Ada, he said weakly, did you get my medication? I held up the pharmacy bag but didn't approach him. Chinedu, we need to talk. About your health, about Folake, and about what happens next. His eyes widened with something that looked like hope mixed with fear. But first, I continued, you're going to tell our children the truth about why Daddy hasn't been feeling well. The game was changing. And this time, I was ready to play to win. The tension is building. What do you think Ada's next move should be? Like and subscribe to see what happens when the truth finally comes out. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom windows as I watched Chinedu struggle to button his shirt. His hands trembled slightly. Whether from medication side effects or stress, I couldn't tell. Over the past 2 weeks, his physical deterioration had become impossible to ignore. Let me help you, I said quietly. He looked up in surprise. It was the first time in nearly 3 weeks that I'd offered him assistance with anything. As I buttoned his shirt, I felt the familiar contours of his body, now thinner than I remembered. This was the man I had shared a bed with for over 2 decades, the father of my children, the partner who had once whispered dreams of growing old together. Ada, his voice was soft, vulnerable. Save it, I interrupted gently. We have more pressing matters to discuss. I had spent the weekend planning my next move with military precision. Dr. Adeyemi's revelations had shifted the battlefield entirely. This wasn't just about marital betrayal anymore. It was about protecting a sick man from a manipulative woman who might be endangering his health while positioning herself to benefit from his demise. Chinedu, I know about your medical condition. I know about the blood pressure, the anxiety, the medication you've been hiding from me. His face went pale. How? I also know that Folklore has been telling medical staff that I'm your ex-wife, that she's been making medical decisions as your fiancé, while telling our children their father is just working too hard. He sank onto the edge of our bed, his head in his hands. Ada, it's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Because right now it looks like you've been planning to divorce me, leave me penniless, and let your girlfriend handle your medical care while she waits for you to die so she can inherit everything. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Chinedu's shoulders shook, and for a moment I thought he might cry. She said you would take everything in a divorce, that you would poison the children against me, that I needed to protect myself legally. And you believed her over your wife of 23 years. I was scared, Ada. The business has been struggling. The economy, the dollar rate, competition from other importers. We've been losing money for months. I didn't want you to worry. This was news to me. What do you mean, struggling? We're behind on the warehouse rent. 2 of our biggest clients haven't paid their invoices. I've been using personal savings to cover payroll. He looked up at me with eyes full of shame. I was afraid you'd leave me if you knew how bad things were. The pieces of a larger puzzle began falling into place. A financially vulnerable man, stressed about business failures, being manipulated by a woman who promised security and understanding. Classic predator behavior. So you thought the solution was to hide everything from me and plan to give what little we have left to your secretary? Folklore helped me refinance some of the business debt. Her family has connections in banking. Her family? I laughed bitterly. Chinedu, what do you actually know about Folklore's family? His confused expression told me everything. He knew nothing about her background, her connections, or her true motives. She had played him perfectly. My phone buzzed with a text message from Chinyu. Ada, urgent. Call me now. We'll continue this conversation later. I told Chinedu. Take your medication. Rest. And don't make any more decisions about our family's future without consulting me. I stepped outside to call Chinyu, my heart already racing with anticipation. Ada, you need to sit down, she said without preamble. What did you find? I had my investigator friend look into Folklore Adebayo. Girl, this woman is not who she claims to be. What do you mean? Her real name is Folklore Ogundipe. She's been married twice before, both times to older, wealthy men. Both marriages ended within 3 years, with the husbands losing substantial assets. She's essentially a professional gold digger with a refined method. My legs felt weak. Go on. The banking connections she claims? They're her ex-brother-in-law's contacts, and she's burned those bridges too. She's currently in debt to several Lagos businessmen and has been using Chinedu's credit to finance her lifestyle. What? Ada, your husband has been co-signing loans for her. His name is on credit agreements for her rent, her car, even her shopping trips. She's been bleeding your family finances while positioning herself to inherit whatever's left. I sank into one of our patio chairs, staring out at the Lagos skyline that had been the backdrop to my adult life. Everything I thought I knew about this affair was wrong. Chinedu wasn't just cheating. He was being systematically financially abused. There's more, Chinyu continued. I found court records. She's currently being sued by her landlord for unpaid rent, despite the Instagram posts showing her living luxuriously. The expensive gifts, the trips, the lifestyle, it's all being funded by debt. Your husband's debt. How much debt? Conservatively? About 12 million naira. And that's just what I could find easily. 12 million naira. Nearly our entire savings. Money that was supposed to secure our children's education, our retirement, our family's future. Chinyu, I need copies of everything you found. Already prepared. I'm sending a driver to deliver the files to you within the hour. As I hung up, I heard voices from inside the house. Chinedu was on the phone, his voice strained and defensive. Folklore, I told you I can't access more money right now. No, Ada doesn't know about the loans. I understand you're under pressure, but... I walked back inside just as he was ending the call. His face was flushed, his breathing shallow. More financial help for your girlfriend? I asked calmly. He looked guilty and exhausted. Ada, she's in trouble. Some loan sharks are threatening her. I just need to help her get clear, and then... Then what? You'll divorce me and marry a woman who's been lying to you about everything from her name to her family background. What are you talking about? I sat down across from him, studying the man I had married. Somewhere along the way, the confident businessman had been replaced by this confused, manipulated version of himself. Her real name is Folklore Ogundipe. She's been married twice before to wealthy older men. Both times, she destroyed their finances and moved on. She's currently in debt to multiple creditors and has been using your credit to fund her lifestyle while telling you sob stories about loan sharks. The color drained from his face. That's not possible. She showed me her business plan, her family connections. All lies. And now she's pushing you to leave me everything in your will while simultaneously trying to replace me as your medical proxy. Don't you see the pattern? Chinita's hands began to shake more violently. The stress of this revelation, combined with his existing health issues, was clearly overwhelming him. I need my medication, he whispered. As I watched him struggle to open the pill bottle, I made a decision that surprised even me. Despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the financial manipulation, this broken man was still the father of my children. And if I didn't act quickly, Folklore would finish destroying what was left of him. Chinidu, I said firmly, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your lawyer and revoke that will. You're going to close any joint accounts or credit lines with Folklore. And you're going to let me handle salvaging our business and our finances. Ada. Or, I continued, you can continue being manipulated by a con artist until she's taken everything and left you a broken, sick man with nothing to show for 25 years of hard work. He looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for months, respect. What about us? He asked quietly. What about our marriage? I considered the question carefully. The betrayal still burned. The humiliation still stung. But watching him in this moment, vulnerable, confused, finally seeing the truth about his situation, I realized that my husband hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been victimized. That, I said finally, depends on how committed you are to fixing the mess you've made. The war was far from over, but the battlefield had shifted once again. Now I wasn't just fighting for my marriage or my children's inheritance. I was fighting to save a man who had been too proud and too scared to ask for help until it was almost too late. But first, I had to neutralize the threat that was Folklore Ogundipe. What do you think of this twist? Are you surprised by Folklare's true identity? Share your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking reveals. The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally arrived at my doorstep, literally. I was preparing breakfast for the children when our security guard knocked urgently on the kitchen door. Madam, there's a woman at the gate. She says she's Mr. Chinita's fiancé and she needs to see him immediately. My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my voice steady. Tell her to wait. I'll handle this. Through the window, I could see a sleek black Camry parked outside our gate. Even from a distance, I could make out Folklare's silhouette, perfectly dressed, carefully positioned, ready for battle. Mummy, who's that woman? Kemi asked, noticing my tension. Someone Daddy knows from work, I replied carefully. Keep eating your breakfast. I climbed the stairs to find Chinidu in our bedroom, already dressed, but moving slowly. The previous night's revelations about Folklare's true identity had left him shaken and withdrawn. Your girlfriend is here, I announced. His face went pale. What? At our gate, demanding to see you. I assume this is about the financial support you can no longer provide. Chinita sank into the bedside chair, his hands trembling. Ada, I don't know how to handle this. Yesterday, you told me she's been lying about everything. But she has photos, documents, things that prove we're together. What kind of documents? Pictures of us at restaurants, hotels, text messages. She said if I try to end things, she'll destroy my reputation publicly. Blackmail. Of course. I should have expected this escalation. Get dressed properly, I told him firmly. We're going down there together. Together. Chinedu, you've been handling this woman alone for 2 years. And look where it's gotten you. Nearly bankrupt, manipulated, and sick with stress. It's time for a different approach. As we walked down the stairs, I could see the children getting ready for school. Tund was struggling with his school bag. Adana was searching for her favorite hair ribbon. And Kemi was organizing everyone with the efficiency of a small general. This was what mattered. This family, this home, these children who deserved stability and security. Not the drama waiting outside our gate. Whatever happens out there, I told Chinedu quietly, remember that this is your home. These are your children. And I am your wife, legally, financially, and in every way that matters. He nodded, some strength returning to his posture. We approached the gate together. Folake stood beside her car, wearing a figure-hugging red dress and expensive jewelry. Jewelry I now knew was purchased with my family's money. When she saw me walking alongside Chinedu, her confident expression faltered for just a moment. Chinedu, baby. She rushed toward the gate, ignoring me completely. I've been so worried. You weren't answering my calls. Hello, Folake. His voice was steady but cold. I believe you wanted to speak with me? Yes, privately. About our future plans. She shot a dismissive glance at me. Perhaps your friend could give us some privacy? I almost laughed at the audacity. I'm his wife, Miss Ogundipe, and this conversation affects our family's finances, so I'll be staying. Her eyes widened at my use of her real name. The mask was slipping. I don't know what lies people have been telling you, she said, her voice rising slightly. But Chinedu and I are engaged. We're planning our wedding for next month. Really? I pulled out my phone, displaying one of the documents Chinyu's investigator had provided. Is that before or after your court date for unpaid debts? And which name will you use on the marriage certificate? Folake Adebayo or Folake Ogundipe? The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. Chinedu, you see how she's trying to turn you against me? This is exactly why we need to be together. She's manipulative, controlling. Enough. Chinedu's voice cut through her performance. Folake, I know about your previous marriages. I know about the debts. I know about the lies. What lies? Baby, whatever she's told you. The banking connections that don't exist. The family background you fabricated. The business degree you never earned. His voice grew stronger with each revelation. I know about the court cases, the unpaid rent, the other men you've been seeing while claiming to love me. Folake's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful bastard. Do you think any of this matters? I gave you 2 years of my life. I made you feel like a man again when your wife was treating you like a stranger. You gave him debt and stress, I interjected calmly. 12 million naira in debt, to be precise, plus hypertension and anxiety that required medical treatment. And you gave him what? Cold dinners and silent treatments. The accusation stung because it contained truth. I had withdrawn emotionally from my marriage long before discovering the affair. But that didn't justify what she had done. I gave him 23 years of loyalty, 3 children, and a business we built together from nothing, I replied. What did you give him besides bills and blackmail? Blackmail. Folake's voice rose to a shriek. I loved him. You loved his bank account, Chinedu said quietly. And when that ran dry, you started pressuring me to change my will so you could wait for me to die. That's not. She stopped, realizing she had no defense for this accusation. It's over, Folake, Chinedu continued. I'm closing the joint accounts. I'm revoking the will. I'm cutting all financial ties between us. You can't do this to me. Her desperation was now fully visible. I have nothing without you. Those men I owe money to, they'll hurt me. That's not my problem anymore. Fine. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking with rage. If you want to play games, I have photos, videos, text messages that will destroy your reputation and your business. I'll send them to everyone, your clients, your church, your children's schools. The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. This was the nuclear option. Complete social destruction through public humiliation. But I had been preparing for this moment. Miss Ogendipe, I said calmly, pulling out my own phone, I have something better. I have police contacts, fraud investigators, and detailed financial records showing how you've systematically defrauded my husband. I also have statements from your previous victims. Yes, there are others, documenting your pattern of financial manipulation. I could also, I continued, contact the immigration authorities about the false identity documents you used to secure some of those loans. Identity fraud is a federal offense. Her face went ashen. The confident predator had become cornered prey. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to disappear from our lives. Completely. No more contact, no more threats, no more attempts to collect money for my husband. In return, I won't pursue criminal charges for fraud. And if I refuse, then you'll discover exactly how much influence a respected Lagos businesswoman can wield when protecting her family. The standoff lasted several long seconds. Finally, Folklore turned toward her car without another word. But as she reached the door, she turned back with a venomous smile. You think you've won? You think saving him from me will fix your broken marriage? He came to me because you made him feel unwanted. That's on you, Ada. That will always be on you. The words hit their target. Because despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the financial betrayal, there was truth in what she said. I had let my marriage grow cold long before Folklore arrived to exploit its weaknesses. As her car disappeared down our street, I felt Chinita's eyes on me. Ada. Not now, I said quietly. The children need to get to school. But as we walked back toward the house, I knew the hardest conversation was still ahead. We had neutralized the external threat, but the internal damage to our marriage remained. Could a relationship survive this level of betrayal and deception? And more importantly, did I want it to? That's a wrap on the confrontation. But is Ada and Chinita's story really over? What do you think happens next in this marriage? Comment below and hit that notification bell. The following weeks passed in a strange limbo. Chinita had kept his word. He closed the joint accounts with Folklore, revoked the will, and began the painful process of assessing our true financial situation. The damage was extensive but not catastrophic. With careful management and some difficult sacrifices, we could recover. But emotional recovery was proving more complicated. We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing a house. He slept in the guest room temporarily, though neither of us mentioned when temporary might end. I resumed cooking full meals, but we ate largely in silence. The children sensed the tension and responded with extra good behavior, as if afraid that any disturbance might shatter our fragile peace entirely. It was Kemi who finally forced the conversation I'd been avoiding. Mummy, are you and Daddy getting divorced? I looked up from the financial records I'd been reviewing at the dining table. My 15-year-old daughter stood there with her school bag, ready to leave for her final exams, but her eyes held an anxiety that broke my heart. Why would you ask that, sweetheart? Because you act like roommates. You're polite, but you don't talk. Daddy looks sad all the time, and you look angry even when you're smiling. She sat down across from me. Tund asked me if Daddy did something bad. Adana has been having nightmares. The impact on our children. In all my focus on financial recovery and emotional self-protection, I had underestimated how profoundly this marital crisis was affecting the innocent lives depending on us. Your father and I are working through some difficult issues, I said carefully. Does working through it mean you might stay together? I don't know yet. Kemi's eyes filled with tears. I know something bad happened. I'm not a child anymore, Mummy. I see how you look at him, like he hurt you really badly. But he's still our daddy, and you're still our parents. After she left for school, I sat alone with her words echoing in my mind. In my righteous anger and justified hurt, had I lost sight of what mattered most? That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I drove to Chinita's office. The familiar building in Acadia Industrial Estate looked smaller somehow, less impressive than I remembered. Inside, the staff greeted me warmly, but with cautious expressions. Everyone knew something had happened, though the details remained private. I found Chinedu in his office, surrounded by paperwork and looking older than his 52 years. The confident businessman I'd married had been replaced by someone more humble, more uncertain. Ada. He looked up in surprise. Is everything okay? The children are fine. We need to talk. I closed the door and sat across from his desk, the same seat where I'd sat countless times over the years discussing business decisions, family plans, and shared dreams. Chinedu, I've been thinking about what Kemi said this morning. What did she say? She asked if we were getting divorced. She's worried about her siblings. They all are. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of parental responsibility settling on his shoulders. What did you tell her? That we were working through difficult issues. But the truth is, I don't know if we are working through anything. We're just existing in the same space. Ada, I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. I betrayed our marriage, endangered our family's financial security, and allowed another woman to manipulate me into nearly destroying everything we built together. Yes, you did all of that. But I want to fight for us. For our family. If you'll let me. I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd become so wary of. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and something that looked like hope. Fighting for us would require complete honesty, I said. About everything. The business problems, the loneliness that made you vulnerable to Folklore, the reasons you felt you couldn't trust me with the truth about our financial situation. I was ashamed, he admitted. You married a man with big dreams and ambitious plans. When those plans started failing, when the business began struggling, I felt like I was disappointing you. So you decided to handle a loan. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I thought I could protect you from worry. He laughed bitterly. Instead, I made everything worse. Chinedu, we've been married for 23 years. We've weathered business challenges before. What made you think I wouldn't stand by you through this one? Because somewhere along the way, we stopped talking about the hard things. We became efficient co-parents and business partners, but we stopped being intimate. Not sexually, emotionally intimate. The observation stung because it was accurate. When had we stopped sharing our fears, our hopes, our daily struggles? When had our conversations become limited to schedules, children's needs, and business logistics? That doesn't justify the affair, I said firmly. No, it doesn't. Nothing justifies what I did. But it explains why I was vulnerable to someone who seemed to offer understanding and support without judgment. Someone who was actually planning to destroy you. Yes. And if you hadn't fought for our family, if you hadn't investigated and exposed her true motives, I might have lost everything, including my children's respect. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 23 years of shared history settling between us. Ada, I know you don't trust me anymore. I know I may have damaged our marriage beyond repair. But I want to try to earn back your trust, even if it takes years. What would that look like? Complete financial transparency, marriage counseling, individual therapy to understand how I became so susceptible to manipulation. Whatever it takes. I considered his proposal. The practical part of me recognized that rebuilding our marriage would be easier than dividing assets, managing co-parenting logistics, and starting over at 45. But that wasn't reason enough. The question was whether I still loved the man sitting across from me enough to do the hard work of forgiveness and rebuilding. I need time, I said finally. And I need to see actions, not just words. How much time? I don't know. But I'm willing to try counseling. For the children, and to see if there's anything left worth saving. Relief flooded his face, but I held up a hand. This doesn't mean I forgive you. It doesn't mean we're okay. It means I'm willing to explore whether we can build something new from what's left. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. Don't forget that. As I drove home through Lagos traffic, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. A tiny seed of hope. Not for a return to what we'd had, that was gone forever, but for the possibility of creating something different. Something more honest, more resilient, built on the foundation of hard-won wisdom rather than naive trust. But first, we had to survive the hardest part, learning to forgive without forgetting, and rebuilding intimacy after betrayal. The real work was just beginning. Do you think Ada is making the right choice? Should she give Chinedu another chance? Or is forgiveness just setting herself up for more heartbreak? Share your thoughts below. The marriage counseling sessions took place in a quiet office in Ikeja, where Dr. Sarah Oduya, a no-nonsense psychologist with kind eyes, guided us through the wreckage of our relationship with surgical precision. Ada, she said during our third session, you've done an excellent job of documenting Chinedu's betrayals and protecting your family's interests. But I notice you haven't talked much about your own pain. I shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair. I've moved past the pain. I'm focused on practical solutions now. Have you? Because anger can sometimes be a shield against deeper hurt. Chinedu sat across from me, his hands folded, listening intently. The past month of counseling had revealed a pattern. He spoke openly about his shame, his poor decisions, his desperate desire to make amends. I spoke about logistics, legalities, and the children's needs. But I had built walls around my emotional truth. Ada, Dr. Oduya continued gently, what did it feel like to discover that will? The question cracked something inside me. Suddenly, I was back in our bedroom, the document falling from my trembling hands, the ground shifting beneath my feet as I realized that the man I'd devoted my life to had been planning to erase me entirely. It felt like dying, I whispered, surprised by my own honesty. 23 years of love and sacrifice, reduced to nothing. It felt like discovering I'd been married to a stranger. Tears came then, tears I'd been holding back for months. Chinedu reached toward me instinctively, then stopped himself. What stopped you from reaching for her, Chinedu? Dr. Oduya asked. I don't have the right to comfort her anymore, he said quietly. I caused this pain. Ada, what would it mean if he comforted you right now? I looked at my husband through blurred vision. I don't know. I've been so angry for so long, I've forgotten how to let him close. Anger is easier than vulnerability, Dr. Oduya observed. But healing requires vulnerability from both of you. That evening, we drove home in thoughtful silence. The children were spending the night with my sister Nkechi, giving us rare, alone time in our house. I'm going to make dinner, I announced, more to fill the silence than from hunger. Ada, let me cook tonight. I turned to study his face. You can't cook. I've been learning. YouTube tutorials. Practice when you're out with the children. I want to start taking care of you the way you've taken care of me for 23 years. The kitchen that followed was a comedy of errors, over-salted soup, slightly burned rice, vegetables chopped with questionable technique. But watching Chinedu navigate unfamiliar territory with determined concentration, I saw something I hadn't noticed in years. Effort. Pure, unglamorous, humble effort. This is terrible, I said after tasting his pepper soup. I know, but it's better than last week's attempt. Despite everything, I smiled. A real smile, not the polite ones I'd been offering for months. Chinedu, can I ask you something? Anything. When did we stop laughing together? He paused, considering the question seriously. I think it was gradual. Business pressures, children's needs, social obligations. Somewhere in there, we became so focused on managing life that we forgot to enjoy it. And that made you vulnerable to someone who seemed to offer fun and excitement. Among other things, yes. Folklore made me feel young again, carefree. But it was all an illusion built on lies and manipulation. We ate his imperfect dinner by candlelight, not for romance, but because the electricity had gone out, as it frequently did in Lagos. In the flickering light, I studied the man I'd married, looking for traces of the person I'd fallen in love with at university. Tell me about the business problems, I said. The real extent of it. For the next hour, he laid out everything. The failed contracts, the clients who hadn't paid, the inventory stuck in customs, the loans taken to keep employees paid. It was worse than I'd imagined, but not insurmountable. Why didn't you tell me when it started? Because you were so proud of our success. You bragged about me to your friends. introduced me as your successful businessman husband. I couldn't bear to disappoint you. Chinedu, I didn't marry you for your success. I married you because you were kind, ambitious, and you made me laugh. Success was something we built together. I forgot that. I started believing that my value as a husband was tied to my ability to provide luxury. And when you couldn't provide luxury, you found someone who made you feel valuable in other ways. Yes, it was selfish and destructive, but yes. We talked until late into the night, really talked, the way we hadn't in years. About dreams deferred, fears hidden, the slow erosion of intimacy that had left us vulnerable to outside threats. Ada, I know I may never fully earn back your trust. But I want you to know that these past months, watching you fight for our family, while I was too weak to fight for myself, I've fallen in love with you all over again. Don't, I said softly. Don't what? Don't romanticize this. What we're doing is hard work, not a love story. Can't it be both? I considered this. Maybe. But first, you need to prove that you're strong enough to be my partner, not just someone I have to protect from predatory women. How do I prove that? By handling the business, recover yourself. By standing up to pressure, without crumbling. By becoming the man our children need their father to be. He nodded solemnly. And if I can do that, if I can become stronger, more honest, more deserving of your trust. I looked at this imperfect man who had nearly destroyed our family, but was now fighting to save it. The future was uncertain, trust would take years to rebuild, and there would be more difficult conversations ahead. But for the first time in months, I could see a path forward that didn't involve divorce lawyers and custody arrangements. Then maybe, I said carefully, we can build something better than what we had before. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something more valuable, a realistic beginning. The hard work of rebuilding was just starting, but we were finally starting it together. What do you think about second chances in marriage? Can trust really be rebuilt after betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments. 6 months later, I stood in our renovated kitchen, watching the Lego sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. The house felt different now, not because of the fresh paint or new appliances, but because of the laughter that once again echoed through its halls. Mummy, Daddy burned the eggs again, Adana announced, running in with her school uniform slightly askew. I could hear Chinedu in the dining room, defending his cooking to our children with mock indignation. These are not burned, they're well done. That's what you said about the plantain last week, Tund replied, giggling. And the rice the week before that, Kemi added, though her tone was affectionate. I smiled as I fixed Adana's collar. The morning cooking disasters had become family entertainment. Chinedu had insisted on taking over breakfast duties as part of his campaign to earn his keep, and while his culinary skills remained questionable, his effort was undeniable. Mrs. Ada, Jennifer, our office manager, appeared at the kitchen door. Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Chinedu asked me to remind you about the meeting with the Chinese suppliers this afternoon. I nodded. The business recovery had been slow but steady. We'd restructured our debt, found new clients, and most importantly, begun working as true partners again. I now handled all financial decisions jointly with Chinedu, and he had learned to communicate problems before they became crises. Also, Jennifer added with a knowing smile, congratulations on the new contract with the Abuja retail chain. That's a big win. It was a big win. After months of careful planning and joint presentations, we'd secured our largest client yet. The business was not only surviving, but beginning to thrive again. As Jennifer left, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Oduya. How are things going with you and Chinedu? I typed back, better. Not perfect, but better. Perfect had never been our goal anyway. Dr. Oduya had taught us that healthy marriages weren't about perfection. They were about honesty, communication, and the willingness to keep choosing each other despite imperfections. The therapy sessions had been brutal at times. Chinedu had to confront his tendency to hide problems and seek external validation. I had to acknowledge my part in the emotional distance that had grown between us and learn to be vulnerable again after betrayal. But slowly, painfully, we had rebuilt something stronger than what we'd had before. Ada, Chinedu called from the dining room. Could you rescue breakfast before I traumatize our children further? I laughed, a sound that still surprised me sometimes. When had laughter become foreign to me? When had I forgotten that marriage could be joyful as well as challenging? In the dining room, I found the usual morning chaos. Tun searching for his homework, Kemi organizing everyone's schedules like a miniature CEO, and Adana drawing elaborate pictures on napkins while eating around Chineda's admittedly overcooked eggs. Mummy, look. Adana held up her artwork. It's our family. The drawing showed 5 stick figures holding hands in front of a house, all with enormous smiles. Simple, innocent, perfect. It's beautiful, baby. Are you and Daddy happy now? She asked with the directness only 7-year-olds possess. I caught Chineda's eye across the table. We discussed how to answer this question, knowing it would come eventually. We're working on being happy, I told her truthfully. Sometimes grown-ups have to fix things that get broken, and that takes time. But yes, we're much happier than we were before. Good, she said matter-of-factly, returning to her drawing. I like it when you smile at Daddy again. After the children left for school, Chinedu and I lingered over coffee, a morning ritual we'd established during our reconciliation process. Did you see this? He showed me his phone, displaying a LinkedIn article about women in African business. My recent interview about rebuilding after business challenges had been featured. I read the excerpt. Success isn't about avoiding failure, says Ada Okafor, co-owner of Okafor International Trading. It's about how you respond when failure finds you. Whether in business or personal relationships, the strongest foundations are often built on the ruins of what came before. You've become quite the philosopher, Chinedu teased. I've learned few things about resilience this year. We both have. He reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture that would have felt foreign 6 months ago, but now felt natural again. Ada, I know I say this every day, but I'm sorry. For everything. For nearly losing the most precious thing in my life because I was too proud and too foolish to value what I had. I know you are, I said, squeezing his hand. And I'm sorry too. For letting our marriage grow cold, for not fighting for us sooner, for being so focused on being right that I almost forgot about being loving. It had taken months to reach this place of mutual accountability. Early in our reconciliation, I'd wanted him to bear all the blame while I remained the innocent victim. But healing required recognizing that while his betrayal was unforgivable, our marriage had been deteriorating long before Folklore arrived to exploit its weaknesses. Mrs. Okafor, our security guard knocked on the door. There's a young woman here to see you. Says her name is Grace, and it's about the support group. I smiled. Send her in. 3 months ago, I'd started a support group for women dealing with infidelity and financial betrayal in marriage. What began as informal conversations with friends had grown into a structured program that met weekly at our local community center. Grace Ademola entered our dining room nervously, a young woman in her early 30s with sad eyes and a determined expression I recognized well. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mrs. Okafor, she said, accepting the chair I offered. My friend Adunni said you might be able to help. My husband, he's been... She struggled with the words. Take your time, I said gently. He's been having an affair with his business partner. And I just discovered they've been using our joint account to fund their lifestyle while I've been at home with our 2 young children. The familiar story broke my heart. How many women were suffering in silence, feeling trapped, ashamed, unable to see a path forward. Grace, the first thing I want you to know is that this is not your fault, I said firmly. Whatever problems existed in your marriage, betrayal was not the solution. But maybe if I had been a better wife. Stop. Chineda's voice was gentle but firm. I said those exact words to myself for months. Maybe if I had been a better husband, a more successful provider, a more attentive partner. But the truth is, when we choose to betray our spouses, that choice is entirely our own. It's not about what they did or didn't do. Grace looked surprised to hear this from a man, especially one who was clearly speaking from experience. My husband betrayed our family in the most devastating way possible, Chinedu continued. But I've learned that healing, whether the marriage survives or not, requires each person taking responsibility only for their own choices. Are you two reconciling? Grace asked hesitantly. I exchanged a look with Chinedu. We're trying, I said honestly. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and there are no guarantees. But we decided our family was worth fighting for. How do you trust again? Very slowly, Chinedu replied. And with complete transparency. Ada has access to everything. My phone, my email, my bank accounts, my schedule. I've had to earn back the right to privacy. And you? Grace turned to me. How do you get past the anger? I'm still working on that, I admitted. Some days are better than others. But I've learned that holding onto anger was poisoning me more than it was punishing him. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about choosing to build a future instead of being trapped in the past. We talked for another hour, sharing resources, strategies, and hope. When Grace left, she looked lighter somehow, not healed, but hopeful. You're good at this, Chinedu observed, helping other women find their strength. I learned from the best teachers, betrayal and necessity. That evening, as we prepared for bed, I reflected on how far we'd come. The guest room that had been Chinedu's temporary residence for months was now back to being a guest room. We'd returned to sharing a bed, though intimacy was still being rebuilt slowly, carefully, with respect for the trust that was still healing. Ada, Chinedu said as we turned off the lights, do you think we'll make it? It was a question he asked periodically, seeking reassurance about our uncertain future. I think, I said carefully, that we're making it. Every day that we choose honesty over deception, every day that we choose to work on our problems instead of running from them, every day that we put our family first, we're making it. Even on the bad days? Especially on the bad days. Outside our window, Lagos hummed with its eternal energy. Street vendors calling out their wares, generators rumbling to life, music drifting from nearby compounds. The city that had witnessed our courtship, our wedding, our children's births, and our near divorce was now witnessing our renewal. 6 months ago, I had been a woman betrayed, financially threatened, and emotionally devastated. I'd fought back with every weapon at my disposal, legal knowledge, financial acumen, social connections, and sheer determination to protect my children's future. But the real victory hadn't been exposing Folklare's lies or protecting our assets. The real victory was learning that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's choices, and that sometimes the most radical act of love is refusing to give up on someone who has given up on themselves. Was our marriage perfect now? Absolutely not. Would we face more challenges? Undoubtedly. But we were facing them together, as partners who had learned the hard way that love without honesty is just elaborate pretending, and that real intimacy requires the courage to be vulnerable even after being wounded. As I drifted off to sleep beside the man who had betrayed me and then fought to deserve me again, I thought about the women in my support group, the children sleeping safely down the hall, and the business we were building stronger than before. This was what victory looked like, not a fairy tale ending, but a realistic beginning built on hard-won wisdom, daily choices, and a revolutionary belief that even broken things can be made beautiful again. The story that had begun with betrayal and had become something else entirely. A testimony to the power of a woman who refused to be erased, a family that refused to be destroyed, and a love that had learned the difference between pretty promises and profound commitment. And tomorrow we would wake up and choose each other again. The end. What an incredible journey. Ada's story shows us that sometimes the most powerful revenge is refusing to let betrayal define you. Instead of being destroyed by Chinedu's infidelity, she fought for her dignity, protected her family, and ultimately transformed both herself and her marriage. Did you root for their reconciliation or think Ada should have walked away? What lessons from this story resonate with your own life experiences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if Ada's strength inspired you. Subscribe to Tales by Ben for more powerful African stories. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share this story with someone who needs to hear about the power of resilience. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Thank you for joining Ada on this incredible journey from betrayal to renewal. Remember, you are stronger than you know, and your story isn't over yet. Until next time, this is Tales by Ben, reminding you that every ending can become a beginning.